Today, we stand at a decisive turning point in the battle for information and storytelling. Politicians and the legacy media are living in a delusion if they think they still control the narrative. The world has been transformed, and so has the way we communicate, share, and consume information. And those shadowy figures in backrooms need to wake up and adapt. The explosive rise of social media has shattered the monopoly, empowering each of us to become our own storytellers. Platforms like X and even Facebook, where the shackles are hopefully being taken off, are emerging as revolutionary forces, enabling everyday people to broadcast their voices and experiences in real time. The era when the privileged few dictated the stories we hear and the truths we accept is over. We no longer have to accept information at face value. We can instead be the dynamic architects of the narrative itself. While social media is often criticised for spreading misinformation, it also provides a platform for community notes and counter-narratives. Users can swiftly debunk false claims, share credible sources, and engage in discussions that enhance public understanding. And this dynamic creates a more informed citizenry, capable of critically assessing information rather than passively consuming it as dictated by the legacy media. And let's face it, trust in politicians and the legacy media has reached a crisis point. Scandals, blatant biases, and rampant misinformation have not merely chipped away at public confidence, they have decimated it. But more than that, they are the biggest frauds imaginable, and in some cases, they facilitated actual harm, whilst painting themselves as virtuous. Now, I'm not here to dictate which news sources you should trust. In fact, I advise against slavishly following the news as dictated by algorithms, especially given that alternative media outlets are emerging and thriving. Independent journalists and grassroots platforms are breaking down the barriers that once confined narratives to the decrepit grey suits of power. And yes, I encourage you all to experience and explore alternative news outlets, because unless you do, you are doing nothing but create the same echo chambers that the legacy media did for all these years. And I've got to say, if you want to experience the very definition of an echo chamber, then you might want to check out discussions on platforms like Blue Sky, where the likes of James O'Brien could literally fart and everybody simultaneously ejaculates. But the thing is, people like James O'Brien and Owen Jones, for example, are not just significant voices. They play an essential role in understanding the complexities of our current political landscape. And if you regularly tune into GB News and Talk Radio, then I highly recommend you also tune into Double Down News for a fresh perspective that also challenges the mainstream narrative, but from a left-wing viewpoint. And if you are the kind of person that has taken the time to read the court documents regarding Tommy Robinson's conviction, then by now you should have watched the film Silenced in order to make a well-informed decision. And if you think just hearing the name Tommy Robinson is controversial, then herein lies the problem, and the artificial fences put up around discussing all of this need to be smashed down. Reflecting on my past, I realised there was a time when I would never have considered such alternative viewpoints. I was once ensnared by the narrow perspectives of a particular political party, accepting only the narratives propagated by biased publications. But I've got to say, the war in Iraq, based on fables around weapons of mass destruction, and the very idea that odious people like Alistair Campbell and Peter Mandelson would be moral bastions for what was right in society, certainly put paid to any allegiance I had, and even our experience as taxi drivers should have transformed our understanding. News outlets like the BBC never reported accurately our side of the story, and was it any wonder when the head of BBC News at the time was a good friend of George Osborne, who happened to work for BlackRock, who just so happened to be an investor in that parasitic company Uber. How we laugh when chummy politicians rolled out the red carpet for that multinational corporation, regardless of whether they were compliant with the regulations or not. Let's be honest with ourselves. Those who yearn for a return to the old ways of gatekeeping of information are driven by nothing more than political tribalism, which fundamentally undermines the foundation of democratic discourse. Only die-hard sycophants of certain political parties continue to cling to this outdated model, and this mentality fosters an environment where dissenting voices are silenced and the populace is kept in a state of ignorance. And thank goodness that dam has finally burst. Take, for example, the post office scandal. There is absolutely no way in hell that this scandal and subsequent cover-up would have persisted for so long if platforms like X had existed at the time, simply because these platforms enable rapid information sharing and public scrutiny, making it harder for such injustices to remain hidden. There is also appropriate fury about the revelations of child rape in English towns on an industrial scale, and the rage, revulsion and demands for justice and retribution are right and proper, given that the authorities covered up this terror for literally decades. And so for me, an end to the closed shop couldn't have come soon enough. Times they are a-changing. We no longer have to be beholden to specific political parties or their propaganda machines. The old guard's grip on the narrative is dead, and it's time for the truth to take centre stage.